All right. So I'm Jared. Um, I think Caitlin introduced me at the in her presentation, but this is part 4 of the Urban Animals presentation, and essentially what I'm going to be talking about today um, is the pros and cons between uh, animals that have moved into urban environments and their rural counterparts or wild counterparts. And so at first I take a general look at is this kind of better, the pros and cons, is this better for an animal to be in an urban environment? And then I talk about 3 examples of this. All right, so let's get into it. So first, how does an urban environment affect wildlife? And so here are some of the pros. So obviously we have protection from predators as well as the weather. And this kind of comes from man-made shelters. You have these tall buildings that allow animals to kind of hide in from predators in the area, or and also predators aren't able, not all predators are able to get into an urban area, which is a big draw for a lot of animals. And there's also protection from the weather, because if it's there's a lot of shade from all the buildings, so if it's hot out, and animals can also go into buildings if it's cold out. And you also have the urban heat island phenomenon, in which heat is kind of trapped due to pressure differences in the city. And this makes the difference in temperature between night and daytime less drastic, which is also a draw for animals. And there's also a lack of predators. Like I said, not all predators can access an urban environment. And there's abundance of available food. And we already know this because of just what humans drop on the ground or what they put in their trash. And there's an increase in problem solving capabilities. And this is why I included this picture of a raccoon video. And this is actually from a study by Suzanne McDonald she's a biologist and psychologist from York University. And she made this study where she tested 22 urban raccoons and 22 rural raccoons. And what she actually found was what she did was she has this trash can. This is actually a video or a picture of the video of the study that she did. And she had this garbage can secured with a bungee cord, and she found that none of the rural raccoons could actually get into the trash can, whereas 80% of the urban ones could. So once again, this is the increase in solving capabilities. And another example I know of is crows in cities sometimes take walnuts and put them under a slow-moving tire to crack them, as opposed to their rural counterparts who fly up in the air and drop the walnuts to crack them. And I included this adaptations question because it's yet to be known whether these differences are from just predisposed adaptations that allow them to succeed, or whether it's genetic and evolution. So then we have the cons. And obviously a lot of these cons come from humans, because humans created the cities that created the urban animals phenomenon in the first place. And there's also a lot of problems that come with that. And that's part of the lack of nutrition. Most of the food that these animals are getting are not handed to them. They're found on the ground and in the trash. And a lot of that's like junk food and stuff that's not as nutritious, not as energy providing as those that they would find in the wild. And while it is less nutritious, it's actually yet to see if there's an actual negative impact on the animal's health because of that. And then you have air pollutants and light pollutants, especially light pollutants that might change behavioral norms of the animals if they depend on, say, moonlight or night versus day. And then you also have restricted space. So the first example that I chose is Berlin wild boars. And my first question is, why move in? What's in it for them? Why not just stay in the rural spaces that they can find, or the natural habitats that they can find? And one of the reasons is, while access to an abundance of food would be the first guess, studies have shown actually that wild boars in urban areas actually consume the same types of food as those in rural areas. And this kind of was found from a study where 247 wild boar stomachs from hunted wild boars were collected, and almost all except a few had that same exact rural diet. And so you might ask, why then move into the city? Why not stay out? And part of the reason is the nutritional value of the food in Berlin. And because the way the city was designed was to have forests that were very mixed, and these provided foods that are higher in starch and thus provide the boars with higher energy. And then you also have protection, which is a key factor, but not the main driving force, like I said. So some of the problems that come into play with wild boars moving into cities versus their like natural counterparts is that they often stray into gardens and backyards, which creates a lot of human conflict. So this better? Because rural boars tend to avoid human contact. So is the trade-off for more energy and more human contact instead of less human contact better? We'll see. Observation, that's all it is. So my next example is the Los Angeles mountain lion. And the reason I included this example is because a lot of the animals I'm talking about are ones that have really hacked urban life and figured out a way to become successful in an urban environment. And this really isn't the case with mountain lions in Los Angeles. So then you might ask, like, why go urban? And it's really more a necessity than choice. Because with expanded urban areas, it's really hard to stay in their natural habitat. And this is because the natural range of a mountain lion is vast. They have a range of up to 370 square kilometers, um, which is compared to about 25 in an urban environment. So that's a huge difference. And that restricted space contributes to most of the problems that occur with urban mountain lions. And one of the main problems is lack of genetic diversity. That's because they can't travel to the extent that they normally would, and thus a lot of inbreeding occurs. And this creates a lot of genetic problems and a lot of unhealthy mountain lions. And another problem is lethal fights between male mountain lions. And so male mountain lions in their natural habitat don't come into contact with one another often. And that's because they're more than females, the one traveling these large ranges. So when they do come in contact, there are often fights. And actually, fights between males are the number one cause of deaths among Los Angeles urban mountain lions. And then you also have lethal traffic accidents, and this just comes like in a lot of cities and a lot of urban areas from the animals trying to cross from one patch of green to the other and accidentally being hit by a vehicle. And then there's also the restricted ability to mate, which leads to lack of genetic diversity. And surprisingly, there's also rat poison is also a big problem. And in a national park study, showed that 23 out of 24 mountain lions tested were positive for rat poison. And while this is kind of a small sample population, it is indicative of the larger population of mountain lions. So my final example is the Delhi red-faced rhesus macaques. And do they benefit? Yes. These guys have really figured it out. And one of the reasons is their opposable thumbs. And this allows them to easily break into homes and find food and find other stuff. And so you regularly see them stealing food, even alcohol and other random things that they can get their hands on. They've even been seen on electric wires, just chewing on the electric wires. So they've created a big problem in these cities. And they've easily adapted to urban life because they were so well fed by the city's people at first. And this is because in the Hindu religion in India, monkeys are kind of revered because they're connected to one of their demigods who takes the form of a monkey. And so because of this, in the beginning, these rhesus macaques were or fed a lot, and this kind of wiped out their fear of people and led them to just take over the city. They become real menaces, really. Um, and so they colonize different parts of the urban cities, um, and they've really figured it out, quite simply put. But some of the problems for them that have occurred is that they originally had to move in because of the lack of space, from urban development, and this is kind of the big reason a lot of animals actually move in. It's just expanded human, humans taking over, as always. And then there's also their less nutritious diet. So wild macaques eat mainly roots, fruits, bark, and seeds, whereas urban macaques eat whatever they can get their hands on. And like I said earlier, it's kind of yet to be seen if the less nutritious diet has had a real significant impact on their health. We just don't know yet. And also, they travel in smaller numbers. In the wild, rhesus macaques travel in groups up to 200 for protection, for community. There's actually whole social order systems in this species of monkey. It's kind of crazy, actually. But in urban environments, they travel in smaller numbers because there's less space. So there is a trade-off, like always. However, it's kind of the protection that they lost is made up in the protection from the buildings, in a way. All right. So the last question is, let me move my thing. Are urban animals evolving, or are these simply learned behaviors? And what I mean by that is the traits and the behaviors that are being seen in urban animals, are these being passed down from generation to generation, or are these just hey, this species is living here, and just by living here, they're learning how to cope? And so what we're finding is that cities are really evolutionary powerhouses. And what I mean by that is that there's so much change in such a short amount of time that the evolutionary processes are really sped up. And so this like kind of splits biologists between whether this is evolution or not. And some say that rapid evolution is unlikely, that cities are only a few hundred years old. So how could they really be evolving into different species? A lot of them argue that animals just have adaptations that give them the edge already for a more successful urban life. And that can be seen, like the monkeys with a flexible diet and opposable thumbs might make it easier for them to live in a city. And just being able to be flexible with their diet is a big bonus. And we could see like a animal like the mountain lion, like I was talking about, isn't so successful in an urban environment, and maybe that's because it doesn't have the adaptations allowed to cope with it. But others say that Darwin actually underestimated the time in which evolution can take place, and they cite examples like the hawk's beard plant. And while this isn't an animal, it is it is relevant. These plants are the types of plants that grow in like the cracks of concrete or on small patches of soil in urban areas, and they usually have small or big seeds. And the small seeds have kind of a parachute-like shape that carry them to far away spaces. And what we're seeing is in urban areas, these plants have mainly big seeds so that the seeds just drop straight to the ground into the small little patch of soil instead of traveling far distances and possibly landing on a piece of concrete. And then there's also the city blackbirds. And this, what we're seeing is almost a new species evolving. And they have shorter beaks, no migration patterns, different responses to stress, different song pitches. And this is where it gets kind of crazy, because these differences restrict them from mating with forest blackbirds. And so that's kind of a pivotal moment when you're not mating with the other population. That's where stuff splits off. And so while we have our observations, we can't conclude yet. This is just evolution is all observation really right now. Until we see real genetic changes, then we can't really say for sure. So that's all I really have. Let me get this to change. And that's my works cited. That's all I really have for you guys. But other than that, that's it. That's Urban Animals. Thanks for watching, guys.